Ryan here with Dark Rangers Inc. And I realized at the end of a lot of my videos after finishing up in Pixinsite, I use the phrase, and then I finish it in Photoshop. And so what exactly do I mean by that? And today I'm gonna go through how I finish that last 10 to 15% of each photo to really take it over the top and create a final image. And as a bonus, I'm gonna share one tip with you guys that I guarantee most of you aren't using, but should make a nice impact on your final image. So stay. Ryan, what are you doing? Don't tell him all our secrets. Don't listen to him. The whole point of this channel is to help. And we have the best subscribers. And anybody that's watching that isn't a subscriber surely will after this video. So let's give them the best tips and help that we can, because that's how Dark Rangers do it. Yeah, forget this guy. So stay tuned. All right, so we're gonna start in Pixinsite. I just wanna show you guys how I save the files really quick, and then also go over why I like using Photoshop to do some of these final touches. And the big thing comes down to layers, filters, and sliders. So I like using sliders versus curves, because with curves, when you start to make an adjustment, let's say on the reds down here, that curve then tends to go downstream and affect and make this now like aquamarine instead of blue. And so then you can try to do another point to combat that. Now it's purple, and then like a third point to then kind of bring it back to where it was, but even still it's a little bit more teal than blue. So being able to isolate different hue, luminance, and saturation channels is difficult. Also, trying to differentiate sometimes between highlights, shadows, and midtones using a curve can be a little bit more cumbersome. So there are tools that allow you to make this task quite a bit easier in Photoshop, but to get there, we need to save each file as a TIFF. So I just do Crescent PPS, that's pre-Photoshop. I save it as a TIFF file, and I've already done this. And you want to save it as 16-bit. If you save it as 32-bit, you're not going to be able to use all the features in Photoshop, and you're going to end up converting it anyway. It's going to tell you, it's going to give you this warning here that it's insufficient storage, but it's totally fine. It will carry all the data you need to edit. So let's jump into Photoshop, where I have both files ready to go. So I have the star layer and the starless layer, and I've already made a duplicate layer. And the reason I do this is because with layers you can change the blend mode or the opacity. So all the changes that I make, let's say I like the direction that they went, but I don't want them quite as strong, so maybe I can make it 70%, 80%, whatever. I don't have to apply the full 100% of all the changes that I make. So I hit Command J or Control J on Windows, and it creates this second layer. The first thing I do, speaking of sliders, is go to Levels over here on the Adjustments tab. And we have our curve here. I like to adjust the black point by just simply sliding this over till it gets right to the bottom and that curve levels out, because I don't want to clip any. And I can also adjust the midpoint from here too and get a little bit more stretch out of the data. So you can see just with that simple adjustment layer, we were able to bring out quite a bit of contrast and a little bit more detail. I'm then going to hit Shift click to select both, and then I'm going to hit Command or Control E to combine them into one layer. And the reason for that is because the second thing I mentioned was filters. We're going to do the camera raw filter, and it will only apply the filter to one of the two layers. And if it applies it to the levels adjustment, then it's just going to be adjusting the level adjustment. And if it applies it to the starless layer without it, then it's going to be making changes without the adjustment we made with the black point and midpoint. So it's not going to be what we want. So the first thing you have at the top here is the temperature and tint. So this is really nice. I can kind of cool it off a little bit or warm it up. And then I can make the tint either more green or more magenta. So I'm gonna maybe just -2, bring out a little bit of that O2 signal. Exposure, obviously if we go to the right, it's gonna increase it. Contrast, same thing, bump the contrast. Highlights will target the lighter areas like the crescent, and then some of the highlights through here. Excuse me, that was this one. And then shadows can kind of darken it Whites will do similar to the highlights, but it's going to affect more of that through here. I'm going to affect those areas a little bit more specifically in the luminance channel with each color individually. And then blacks will just kind of adjust that dark point. Now, there are some features here like texture. So if you don't have Blur Exterminator, Star Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, some of these other tools, or Topaz Denoise or Sharpening, I'm going to show you some either free or much less expensive ways to accomplish a similar look.
Yeah.
So one of those ways is to add some texture. So you can see if I slide the texture, it brings out more of the details in the crescent. This isn't the way I like to do it. There is that one secret way I told you about in the intro that we're going to go over. Clarity also does the same. And as you can see, clarity has kind of a global effect. It defines all of the structure quite a little bit better. And the one thing you have to remember when you use clarity is it does desaturate the image. So the more clarity, you can see the color does get stripped. So if you add clarity, you're gonna wanna bump it up. I see people get a little heavy-handed with this. You know, I wouldn't really go much above 10. I think we're just gonna go with 5. And then dehaze does exactly what you want. So if there is kind of like a cloudy haze look to it, it will bring that down and kind of sharpen it up a little bit in terms of contrast. Vibrance is like saturation, but just for the midtones. So it tends to give a little bit better look and not like a super over, like this really crazy look here. If we even like at 29, it looks pretty bad there, 25. If we take the vibrance to 25, see how it's much more subtle. So I tend to use midtones quite a bit, but again, adjust the luminance and the saturation individually by each color. Curve, I like this because again, you can do curves just like you can in Pixinsite, and then you can do it by color. If I want to maybe get rid of some of the blue from the background that's not supposed to be there, I can slide this guy over to the right, maybe 1, 2. And if you don't want to use the slider, you can actually do it here, and you can even use decimal points. And then so I can slide it that way so it doesn't bump it in the areas that should be black, and then stretch it a little bit that way. I can do the same thing with red and kind of bring that over a little bit and then give it a little bit of bump there. Green, you're usually going to be, if anything, pulling green out a little bit. I think we'll do that. And then if you want to see the difference, all the little eyeballs on all of these, off, on, and then same with the curves, off, on. So not subtle changes are key. I'd rather make a lot of subtle changes than a few big changes. Color mixer, this is probably the most valuable part of Photoshop for me. Instead of using that hue saturation slider, I can do everything individually by color channel. So I can do reds, I can play with the oranges, all the colors individually, and I don't have to try to manipulate that curves line, 6 ways from Sunday. I can just go in and target exactly what I want to do to get the look that I'm going for. Blue, take the blue a little bit more towards teal, and then the purple, we're gonna go this way. And then if you wanna see what color you're really affecting, you can also hold this here and slide it this way. You can take this little plus symbol and hold it over, and then go like that, and it'll fix it as well. I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo it, or Control Z will undo it. You can also do it in saturation. So if you just want to pick that one color range, it'll select it everywhere it is. Same with here, if you just want to bump that up. So that's kind of a cool way to just adjust specific areas that you're looking for. If you don't know exactly which one it's going to be, you can go in and use this little plus symbol with the target on there. Luminance is going to take it and brighten it, as you'd think with the word luminance. The other nice thing too is if it's kind of in between, it'll drag it on both colors proportionate to what it is. And then the blue, we can like right there. But you see how much more fine tunable this is than using the curves, in my opinion. Maybe you like that, that's fine. Definitely not dissing the curves. I just personally, I like to just work at it this way. Most of these other things we're not gonna use. Color grading, I don't know, it's a little too generic for me. Grain basically just adds noise, so it's the opposite of what we want. And then same with vignette, right? We don't want to add vignette. We're trying to take that out with our flat frames. You can use that for portraits or other things in Photoshop, so we'll okay that. So we can already see we've gone from kind of this matte, like flatter looking image to like having a lot more depth, color, and pop to it. And we're only a few minutes in. The next thing that I like to do is go to color lookup. And what these are is essentially LUTs, or basically like kind of filters that you can use. And there's one that's called 3-strip that tends to kind of level out the darks, brings up the darks, flattens out the lights, and then adds saturation. You never want to use any of these at full strength, usually like 20 to 25%. You could do like crisp winter will give it contrast and cool it off, so bring out more of the O3 look. And then crisp warm will do the opposite, it'll warm it up. If you want to add some warmth without the contrast, soft warming is really good. And if you just want to add some contrast without adding color, film stock will do a good job making it pop. And if you see, if you take any of these to full strength, they're pretty aggressive. Again, using the opacity slider over here, I can change the percentage. We're going to use that crisp warm 10%, and then I'm gonna do one more with that. I'm gonna do one more with the film stock at like 20%. Yeah, just gives it a little bit more pop, maybe a little less than that. Okay, so then I'm gonna hit Shift, select, all three selected, Command E, and combine them. And so now we can see before, after. And remember what I said, why I separate this right off the bat? Because now let's say like, you know what, I really like that, but it's a little too much. 50%, 80%, 5%. You can go in now and adjust the amount that the effect is going to have on the final image. What I want to do now is I want to show you some of the actions from STARIZONA, the action pack that you guys saw on the thumbnail. And this will be kind of the less expensive way to do some of the things that you can do with the RC-Astro tools. If you're either newer or you just don't have the budget for it, that's fine. So what I did was I went over to the star layer and I just dragged it and then hovered over this and then drop it down. Once it's in here, this arrow tool up in the upper left, you take that and position it. And then I'm going to go here to blend mode. And blend mode was one of the other 3 things that I said I like about this, because I can choose different blend modes. It's going to have different effects. If I want really little stars, I could go to like lighter color or color dodge, but almost always I use screen. And that's basically just going to apply them exactly as they are. And so I'm going to go to Windows, Actions, and you can buy this for $20 on their website. And again, if you are in a situation where you want that blur exterminator decreased star look, but you don't necessarily want to pay the $100, you can do the star killer layer and hit play. I've already done blur exterminator, and so the stars already are pretty minimized. And so you can see though, it just made them that much smaller. The nice thing is then it created an extra layer so you can turn it on and off. And again, if maybe that's too strong, but you don't want it completely off, you can put it at, let's say 50% and have it somewhere in the middle. Now, since I already did the star reduction with blur exterminator, I'm not going to leave it on. I also have the Triangulum Galaxy that I did to show you some of the other tools. You have compressor. So basically this is what it was before I took it into Photoshop, and after I used compressor, which really brought out some of these spiral arms in the Galaxy, and then core workout, which kind of, if you look, the core is not blown out, it's actually pretty decent, but there's not as much detail. And then when I added it, you see a lot more of the detail in there. So that's some of the other benefits of this tool. It also does have noise smoothing for both color and luminance. So if you, again, can't do Noise X or Topaz denoise, that's another good option for you, and it works pretty well. This is actually pretty close to where I would be. If you want to add a signature, I have this signature thing that I do, and I just take it and I'll drag it over and drop it. It's just telling me that it's a different quality because that's a JPEG and this is a TIFF. And then you can hit Control T. Make sure that that layer is selected, Control T for transform, and then I can move it, center it. I can shrink it down a little bit. It'll automatically center. If I drag, it'll click in place. I usually go up like five up arrows. And then you can do 2 things. You can either, if you want it to not be so bright, hit the soft light or overlay, or you can take the normal and decrease it to like 25%. And then the stars kind of show through. If you do the soft light at 100%, it kind of blends in nicely with the stars. So that's kind of a cool look. And then what I want to do is show you, I promised you guys one secret that you might not already be using. So I want to show you that really quick. And this will give you kind of combination of like Blur Exterminator or maybe Topaz Sharpening. I'm going to combine these. Actually, I'm just going to turn that off for now. So I'm going to hit Command J, copy that layer again, blend mode overlay. And you're like, Ryan, that looks crazy. That's okay. We're going to go to filter, other, high pass, and then I'm going to click this little box on the Crescent Nebula or anything you'd want to sharpen, and then this radius is number of pixels. So if I go to 0, you can see there's nothing selected. If I go really high, it's selecting huge structures, right, at 176 pixels. So what I want to do is I just want to enhance this area right here. And so if I just go like, you know, probably you could make the argument that 2's doing something, 3.5. I really like it like right around 4. See how I can see all the little, but you can see all the little structure is in there and it's enhanced. Yeah, like 4.3. So go with that. And then let's zoom in on it so you can see the difference. And this is a great way to add sharpening for free. So you don't need a plugin, you don't need anything. Off, so look at just the crescent, off, on, off, on. And again, you can change the opacity. And if you're like, well, Ryan, but look, it's affecting the rest of the image. All the stars now are brighter and I don't really want that. That's where we have a mask. So I can take this little rectangle with the circle inside, click that, take my paintbrush with masks, this white area. Anything that's white will show through, anything that's black will be blocked. So if I take this paintbrush, we're gonna make it bigger than 200, make it like 2000, maybe not that big, 1700, and then we're gonna paint in black. We're gonna make sure we're selecting the mask, not the target, and I can just paint away, and now you'll see, I'll leave this upper right hand corner. So look at the stars, see how they're off, and then see how they came back, but they didn't here. So I'm just gonna paint away all the stars, and now you can look down here at the bottom right and see if you missed any spot, but just there's that little white spot. That's just for the Crescent Nebula. So you can zoom in again, and you can see now that that layer is affecting just the crescent. It's not affecting any of the surrounding stars. So that's a really nice way. Now the cool thing is, if you want to sharpen those bigger structures, you can just do it again with a different pixel size and do the same thing. So I can hit Command J again, duplicate it, overlay, filter, other, high pass, and let's say I want to bring out this nebulosity. Well, I can go, let's see, 50. 50 is pretty good. Yeah, somewhere in there. It's bringing all that out. Maybe a little bit more than I want. So I'll drop it down to like 40%. So off, on, and you can see. And then if you want, just like you can do selective masks as well. So I can make sure that that layer is highlighted, go to select, color range, and then take my little eyedropper, go here on this red, and then you can see everything in white is what's gonna be, that's what's going to actually have the change applied to it. Everything in black is gonna be masked or blocked, and I can bring up the fuzziness until I have everything selected that I wanna change. So maybe I wanna get all of that area through there, so I can hit OK. And now I can hit Command J, make that its own layer, and do an overlay of just that. So see how the overlay off on is just in the red areas, and now I can apply that high pass just to that at 50. So now it doesn't hit the stars or anything else. Off on, you can see how it enhances and brings out the structure there. And again, you can drop the opacity if you want and do something like that. The final thing I do is I just let's go ahead and combine all these. So I'll select Command E, and then I go into filter, Topaz denoise. There hasn't been any denoise applied to this yet, so we'll go into the denoise, and it's at 15. There really isn't much noise in here. There's a decent amount of data, but 15 is a pretty low amount. We got the low light, hit that. Now it's totally clean. And then if I wanted to hit it with Topaz Sharpening, I did, but with that trick I showed you with high pass, it should be pretty good. Plus I ran Blur Exterminator on it. And then this was kind of my final image here when I was done with everything. This looks pretty close. And then what I do is I do File, Save As, and I just change it from PPS to Final. I save it as a TIFF. Yeah, I already have it, so I'm not going to do that. And then I change this from TIFF to Photoshop, and if you have the cloud, you can now save this to cloud documents, and now I have it in my cloud, so it's on my phone, so that I don't even have to send it to my phone. I can just download the full-size image right off of the Adobe Cloud. So that's a really quick overview. Obviously there's infinite things you can do. I could do a 5-hour video on this. You can go into brightness and contrast, make some quick changes there. But I hope you can see that using layers and blend modes, and there's so many other filters in here that I didn't even get into, but you can quickly make more specific changes in Photoshop than you're able to in Pixinsite, in my opinion. If you do even have any big mistakes, you can do spot healing, or they do have clone stamp in Pixinsite. But in general, I just find a lot of these fine-tuning issues to be a lot easier to do in Photoshop. If you have any tips or tricks, please leave it in the comments below. And this Friday, I'm going to be putting out another video, so stay tuned for that. And thank you guys for watching. Clear skies.